Alright, what's happening, y'all? It's your boy Rico from Street Scores, and I'm coming with my final 2022 Washington Commander 53-man roster prediction. Now, this is me trying to guess as many as I can, get as many as I can correct, all of that type of stuff. So there may be a little bit of personal bias in this for certain guys that I believe we should get, but there's also a lot of what I think we'll end up doing, even though I'm gonna end up leaving off quite a few players that I definitely wanted to keep over some of the guys that I think we will keep. So again, this is more so a reflection of what I think will happen than what I want to happen, but I can't help it. I gotta put a little bit of Rico in it, you know? But of course, we're gonna go position group by position group. You'll see their pictures on the screen as I talk about them, and of course we're gonna break down the exact number that I have for offense, the exact number I have for defense, and of course it's 3 specialists, so that's fairly obvious. And then I'm also gonna talk about some of the players that almost made it that I feel like will make it to the practice squad in each position group as well. But before we dive into all of that, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the bell next to the subscription button so you get notification immediately. And every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one, make sure you pull up every Friday for the broadcast podcast. Even though I will be gone, we will not have next week's show, but Shay and Jalen should be holding down the following week's show, and then I'll be back after that. And then also make sure you pull up today, as in Sunday, 6 p.m. for the last off-season call-in show. Of course, this show is just going to turn into the during the game live stream and the post-game live stream, 2 separate live streams, one where I'm reacting and breaking down the game live as we're watching it, and then the next one will come back an hour and a half after the game ends, and we'll do the post-game live stream where y'all call in. So make sure y'all pull up today, 6 p.m., the final off-season call-in show before we get to this regular season. And without further ado, let's get it. All right, so I have 26 players for the offense, which with 3 specialists leaves us 24 players for the defense. Starting with the quarterbacks, of course, we have Carson Wentz, Taylor Heineke, Sam Howell. That's pretty obvious. Cole Kelly hasn't been on this team since the Saturday night practice at FedEx Field. We only have 3 quarterbacks. Not really much to dive into here. So we're going to go ahead and go to the running backs. I have us honestly only keeping 3. I think Jonathan Williams, they didn't allow him to practice because he's like firmly at the very least on the practice squad, and him not practicing made me think twice about not having him a part of this running back group. But I'm still just gonna go with 3 running backs because I feel like they're gonna try to keep as much offensive line depth as possible. And again, I don't think Jonathan Williams will get picked up by another team. And even as great as Jared Patterson looked out there, he came out after Reggie Bonifant. So I don't know if that implicates his depth chart placement, and he definitely should not be behind Reggie Bonifant. It should be him and Jonathan Williams competing for the highest practice squad spot, or if they keep 4, it should be those 2 competing for that last spot. Reggie Bonifant he had a pretty good game, but he had some really bad pass blocking reps where it was just like, what are you doing? And I felt like he shouldn't be above Jared Patterson even before that preseason game last night, but that preseason game last night just confirmed it. There's definitely a difference between Jonathan Williams, Jared Patterson, and then there's a gap in Reggie Bonifant. But again, I still have Antonio Gibson, Brian Robinson, and JD McKissick as the only 3 running backs we'll keep, and all 3 will be active on game days. If something happens, we'll just bring a guy up from the practice squad the following week, but hopefully nothing happens. Then wide receiver wise, I have us keeping 6. I have Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, Jahan Dotson, De'Ami Brown, and Cam Sims. Obviously, those are your obvious 5, and Cam Sims is above De'Ami Brown on the depth chart obviously right now. De'Ami Brown didn't do much to help his case at all yesterday. If anything, all he did was make it harder to keep him. Now I still feel like he's almost like a lot to make the roster, and I feel like it's mostly because he's a 3rd round pick from just 2 years ago, and they also still see a lot of potential in him. But I mean, that performance, first of all, this entire offseason, I've been hearing that he's been excellent in practice, but every time we get into a preseason game, he's just dropping passes he should have caught, all kinds of stuff. And so it's just like, and then not even separating as much as we hope as well. So De'Ami Brown, I still feel like is somewhat of a lock to make this team. Like, I'm definitely leaning more towards lock than not lock, but that preseason game yesterday got ugly, and at this point I would have him, me personally, 6th on the depth chart out of the receivers, out of keeping 6, which leaves us to Dax Milne, who technically is getting the 6th spot because he's like the least safe out of these 6 on the screen. But depth chart wise, for me, he's above Dyami Brown. He looks far more ready to contribute on offense. And honestly, during regular season games, you have certain players active, certain players inactive. I would have Dax Milne active and Dyami Brown not active. And maybe if there's an injury, you upgrade Dyami Brown the following week. But I'm letting Dax Milne go out there originally, especially since with this, the logic is, even besides Dyami Brown not looking as good at receiver as we'd hope and Dax Milne outplaying him even in that way, he's also our primary punt returner with this 53-man roster projection. Because if you keep Alex Erickson, that's literally what he's here to do. And granted, even though both Dax Milne and Alex Erickson have looked like better receivers than returners so far in the preseason, Dax Milne, we can expect him to be more consistent contributing on the receiver end. We've seen him do it against higher level competition. Alex Erickson's mostly been doing it against third stringers. And again, if you're keeping Alex Erickson, you're pretty much, even though, like I said, he's been a far better receiver than he's been a returner, the main reason you brought him here is to be a returner. And then that's just an extra roster spot being used up for that. Whereas you could just let Dax Milne be your primary punt returner. Antonio Gibson's your primary kick returner. Maybe Dax Milne is back there for that as well. But of course, you have other players that can also contribute in returning, like Danny Johnson is still a decent returner. And of course, Jahan Dotson, punt return wise, whenever we really need an explosive play, throw him back there. Don't throw him back there a lot. Make sure Dax Milne is the primary punt returner. He's safe. He's not going to muff the punt, but he's also not going to change field positioning. If you want to change field positions, if you want to get an explosive play out of the return game, Antonio Gibson and Jahan Dotson are your best chances. But Dax Milne is the guy that you go out there, he's safe, he's not going to muff punts, and hopefully he makes the right decisions as far as fair catches or not. Like I keep saying, these guys are automatic fair catches. Dax Milne and Alex Erickson, both of them are pretty much automatic fair catches. Even when they don't, they barely go anywhere, and it's like they might as well have anyway. So I'm just going to call them automatic fair catches until I see anything better out of them. But at the end of the day, you want to keep Jahan Dotson and Antonio Gibson out of harm's way, so you don't want to put them back there on punt returns too often, especially Jahan Dotson. And Antonio Gibson again is our starting kick returner moving forward. And then just the rest of the receiver room, I can see Markin Michel making the practice squad. He's the perfect storm of he's good enough to where we feel like we should keep him around, at the very least on the practice squad. And then also, I'm not sure if other teams are really interested in him. So we'll see how that goes. But I think he's pretty safe to stay on our roster. I feel like Alex Erickson, if anything, may end up going to another team that's looking for like some returner guy that may be able to contribute on offense. He'll probably get picked up by them. And then Matt Cole made a couple of plays. He has some drops that he should have caught, including that 1 2-point conversion. Sam Howell had Alex Erickson wide open, but still, Matt Cole still should have caught that. It was straight to his chest. Should have been a 2-point conversion. Should have beat the Ravens on their preseason win streak that they had going on, but it's cool. But either way, Matt Cole, I can see him staying for the practice squad. Maybe even Kyrick McGowan, who's a returner and a receiver as well. Those seem like the type of guys that will end up on the practice squad. Again, I don't think Alex Erickson will stick around like that. I think he'll end up going elsewhere, picked up by another team, especially since he's such a veteran and all of those other guys are really young. Then the tight ends, I have us keeping 4. Of course, Logan Thomas, John Bates, and Cole Turner. I don't think any of them will start on the PUP list. Like I've been saying, if we had to play a Super Bowl tomorrow, I felt like all of them would be available. We're just being overly cautious right now with those guys. And plus, John Bates has started practicing again. Cole Turner, they said a week or two ago that he would be back in a week or two. So it's about time for that. Again, I just feel like they're being overly cautious with everybody. And Logan Thomas is already getting reps in 7-on-7 team drills. He just wasn't targeted the last practice. But I'm expecting him to go out there and be just fine against the Jaguars. And if anything, maybe be on a pitch count. And the reason you can afford to do that is because, first of all, John Bates and Cole Turner, I think they're going to be a full go. And then my boy Armani Rogers, I have him making the team. And this is a sprinkle. This is a little bit of Rico right here. But I also think it's very realistic. This is not just all Rico. I think Armani Rogers will actually make the 53-man roster over other guys. And Curtis Hodges, I'm surprised that he didn't play in that final preseason game because I don't feel like his roster spot is locked. But I'm guessing he was too hurt to play. But then again, they had him dressed up in case of an emergency. If there were injuries to the tight ends like Blanton that we got from the Rams or even Armani Rogers, he would have been able to come in and play. So I don't know. but I'm guessing Curtis Hodges will probably end up on the practice squad. Him and Armani Rogers were undrafted free agents, so it's not very likely that they will get picked up by other teams. But then again, Armani Rogers has been making plays left and right in the preseason, and he was out there with our starters doing that against other starters. So I'm pretty sure other teams have taken notice to him, and I feel like Armani Rogers is far more likely to get picked up by another team if we release them than a Curtis Hodges. And again, I think Curtis Hodges will just end up staying on the practice squad, and maybe even Blanton. I don't know if another team will probably pick him up. Maybe he'd prefer to go to another team for another opportunity, because I remember when we got him, Giants fans, Vikings fans, fans of several teams, and even some analysts and reporters for those teams wanted Blanton. I remember some analysts said it'd be worth it to just go ahead and give up a 7th round pick for Blanton before he even hit the waiver wire, just to make sure you secure him. So I feel like his services will probably be far too requested for him to just end up on our practice squad. Somebody's going to end up taking him, but it would be nice to keep him. And then Eli Wolf is on injured reserve, so that doesn't necessarily count. Then interior offensive linemen, of course, your starters: left guard Andrew Norwell, center Chase Roulier, right guard Trey Turner. And then the backups are Sadiq Charles. Chris Paul has only been getting better every day. I mean, literally day by day, just improving. That's it. Sadiq Charles looks like a way better offensive lineman than I've seen him since we drafted him. He's starting to look a little bit like what I thought he'd be when we first drafted him. Now, granted, he's still not there yet, but he's way better, especially in run blocking. Run blocking, he's really good. Pass blocking, we still have some things to work on, but he's been taking snaps at tackle, guard, and center due to injury throughout training camp so far. And so he's a guy that could really plug in and play anywhere on the offensive line in case of emergency. Even though it's not ideal, it's not like you're just going to end up with somebody abysmal. Sadiq Charles, from what I've seen, is already a better center than John Toth by default, and we can work with that. Just don't be John Toth out there at center if you end up having to play center. But I feel like his best role right now is guard, even though ideally, if his talent would have been what I thought it could have been when he was coming out of the draft, tackle made the most sense. But just by his build and his skill set, his weaknesses and strengths, he's definitely better. He's definitely better projected as a guard. So he's mostly a backup guard. But again, if we run out of resources and everybody else is hurt, we can plug him in really anywhere on the offensive line. And then Wes Schweitzer is the best backup offensive lineman, I would argue, in the NFL. He can step in and start at guard or center, and I'm very fine with that. I'm very happy with that. I mean, if we didn't have Andrew Norwell or Trey Turner, I'd be just as fine letting Wes Schweitzer start, but it's just even better to have him as a backup, and that's why you bring in a Trey Turner and Andrew Norwell, because if one of those other guys get hurt, including Chase Roulier, Wes Schweitzer can step in at that point. But if he's already starting somewhere in the offensive line, if somebody else gets hurt, who steps in for him? So I'm really happy that we have him on this team. It's crazy that he was a backup offensive lineman for the Falcons at one point, a really bad Falcons O-line. John Moscow got a hold of him, and now look at him. It's just ridiculous what John Moscow does. And then Willie Bevers, who's been taking snaps at tackle and guard. I really wanted him to make the team in my 53-man roster prediction, but it was just no space. Maybe he ends up on the practice squad. Nolan Laufenberg is another guard, but I didn't really see him making the team either way. Keith Ishmael, he's banged up, and he hasn't been that good even before he got hurt. So I just see him probably going to the practice squad, because we're going to need a reserve center just in case. I think Keith Ishmael would be that guy. Again, John Toth, he showed you in that preseason game against the Ravens backups why he does not belong on this team, practice squad or anything, man. That was terrible. He was our worst offensive lineman out there, I feel like, easily. And then going to the tackle position, your starters are Charles Leno and Samuel Cosme, obviously. Man, I just be dropping bars by accident, man. And then your direct backup swing tackle is Cornelius Lucas, obviously. And then I got my boy Aaron Montero as one of the backup tackles. He's primarily a tackle, but he even stepped up and started at right guard against the Chiefs. So I just think he's excellent depth right there. Again, he's more of a tackle if anything, but the way he stepped up and played guard, Ron Rivera loves his positional flex guys that can step in no matter what position you need them to. And the fact that he can contribute as a guard or a tackle in case of emergency, I think that's big. And again, the fact that he looked that good while going out there and playing against starting Chiefs defensive linemen for the most part, not all of them, but for the most part, that's really encouraging. And he may have sealed the deal and found a way onto this roster because of that. And then Alex Ankingbulu, I felt like he looked pretty good out there as well, but I believe he's been sent to the injured reserve. So that really just, if we're looking at tackles outside of the top three, your two starters in Cornelius Lucas, technically Sadiq Charles, Alex Ankingbulu, and Aaron Montero are your only options for tackles. tackles. And then Sadiq Charles again is more of a guard than anything, and Alex is on the injured reserve. That literally only leaves you Aaron Montero as like a true backup tackle outside of Cornelius Lucas, Charles Leno, and Samuel Cosme. And it's just like, I think he has to make the team. I would be a little, even though he's not a big flashy name, I would be fairly surprised if he doesn't make the team. And then again, like I said, 24 defensive players, starting with the interior defensive line. You have Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne as your obvious starters. Fadarian Mathis technically is a starter. When we go to 5 defensive linemen looks, he'll be your starting nose tackle. After that, I have Daniel Wise and David Bada. I feel like they both done enough to show you something to where they deserve to make this team. It's heavy competition back there, though. It was really difficult. This was the position group I spent the most time on, really trying to figure out who's going to make the team, because Justin Hamilton looked good at times, Tyler Clark looked good at times, but I think overall David Bada and Daniel Wise will be your guys back there. And then people are, of course, probably thinking, well, what about F.A. Obata? And sadly, as great as F.A. Obata has been this offseason, I would like for him to make the team. But from everything that I'm hearing from reporters so far, it sounds like he may be like a premier practice squad candidate, like one of the guys that we protect from week to week for another team not to pick up just in case we have an injury. So F.A. Obata, a guy that can contribute edge and defensive tackle. I personally would take him over William Bradley King, but from what I'm hearing from John Com and a couple other reporters, the team really loves William Bradley King, but we'll see. And then edge rusher wise, Chase Young is on the PUP list, so he doesn't count. So you have James Smith-Williams starting in his place on one side and Montez Sweat starting on the other side. And then Casey Toohill is the direct backup to those guys. And then again, they love William Bradley King. And then I've also heard that they like Shaka Toney probably even higher than William Bradley King. William Bradley King is more so the you can play right now if you need him to. Shaka Toney is a developmental guy and the specialist. He's the pass rush specialist, really the only guy out of this entire team, including Chase Young and Montez Sweat, that has the type of bend and burst and speed around the edge like he does. And so I just feel like he naturally has a role in this team. I'm gonna keep saying it. I feel like we need to move him to Sam linebacker, first of all because he just needs to be on the field more often, in my opinion, but also he can cover better than what people give him credit for. Off of just those Senior Bowl practices, when they tried him covering for really the first time in his NFL career, he did pretty well, and I feel like we could build on that. But apparently the Burgundy and Gold don't see the vision that I see there right now, including my boy Washington Command Center. He's always been there right with me with Shaka Toney as far as Sam linebacker goes. But again, these are your 5 edge rushers. Chase Young doesn't count, and this is going off of just mostly from reports. I mean, I love Shaka Toney as well, but I'm hearing that William Bradley King or Shaka Toney are guys that should make the team from everything that I've seen and heard around so far. But of course, again, that leaves F.A. Obata off, that leaves Jacob Panajuk off, and I feel like both of those guys will probably end up on the practice squad. And if William Bradley King doesn't make it, he'll probably be one of those premier practice squad guys that we reserve and make sure that nobody else can get. You know, you can protect, I believe it's like 5 practice squad players a week, and so we'll see how that goes. I think he makes the team, but me personally, I like what I saw from F.A. Obata way more than what I saw from William Bradley King throughout this preseason. So that right there is me more so predicting what will happen and not what I want to happen. Then linebackers, I see them only keeping 4 for 2 reasons. First of all, we're going to only be out there with 2 linebackers like 90-something% of the time. I just don't really see too many scenarios where we're going to be out there with 3 linebackers unless it's like a super duper 3rd and 1, 4th and 1 situation. And even then, those Buffalo nickel safeties can probably still handle that role anyway, just in case if they try to throw the ball on one of those situations and try to trick us. I wouldn't be surprised if we literally have no snaps this entire season with 3 linebackers on the field. And then the second reason that I'm only keeping 4 is because Ron Rivera has already addressed the fact that they will be monitoring the waiver wire to potentially bring in another linebacker. So David Mayo or Khaleke Hudson potentially aren't safe. And honestly, looking at it, Khaleke Hudson may be the least safe and will probably be the guy that ends up on the practice squad if they do find a linebacker that they want to bring in. I genuinely think Nathan Gary was destined to make this team if he didn't get hurt. He was making plays in the preseason, and Ron Rivera, even after we brought him in, said they really wanted a guy that can cover and run around with some speed, some athleticism. Khaleke Hudson has not been that. David Mayo is your certified run stopper, and granted, I really don't want to see him on the field. I love what Jamin Davis has done against the run so far this preseason, and we already know what Cole Holcomb can do against the run. So ideally, hopefully David Mayo doesn't have a role on this team. I really don't want to see him on the field if we can avoid it. Even goal line, I think Jamin Davis has improved enough to where he can handle that as well. But at the very least, he has one thing that he's he's at least really good at. You know for a fact David Mayo should be able to step up and make stops in the run. But then you have Khaleke Hudson, who's kind of just like not even a jack of all trades, something lower than that. He literally looks slower than what he looked like his rookie season. I don't know why he's regressed, but I'm gonna need you to step up. And again, I think Khaleke Hudson, if we end up finding a guy on the waiver wire, it would be him that ends up on the practice squad. I think Nathan Gary, honestly, if he didn't get hurt, would have made the roster in Khaleke Hudson's place, and we probably would have only kept 4 linebackers anyway at that point. And then Milo Eifler and Trey Walker were making plays all over the field throughout this preseason, but I just don't think it was enough, along with Dejon Harris as well. Milo Eifler, if I had to pick out of any of the backups that may be a surprise, I think he's the best chance over Dejon Harris and Trey Walker, but I don't think he'll make the team either. I feel like he's definitely destined for the practice squad. And then the cornerbacks, you have your starters, William Jackson III, Kendall Fuller, and Benjamin St-Juste in the slot. Your backup slot is Danny Johnson. Your backup outside corner is Corn Elder. And of course, I mean, I was looking and I was like, man, maybe we can find a way to keep Christian Holmes. But then after that preseason performance, I just don't really think that a lot of teams are out here fighting to get him. Now, granted, even though he was getting cooked, at least he was right there. Other than DeJuan Neal that was just getting straight up beat and burnt by 5+ yards on a lot of those routes. Christian Holmes was right there every time. It was just a good throw and a good catch and a really good route from the receivers. It happens sometimes, but they definitely targeted him an entire drive one time. I mean, literally whoever he was covering, they would throw the ball to, and that's not a good look. But as our final pick in the draft, our second 7th round pick, I think he would easily make it on our practice squad without getting picked up from another team, even though I've heard he's had pretty good training camp practices. Overall, in that preseason game against the backups of the backups of the backups, he didn't look great, but he definitely didn't look as bad as DeJuan Neal. He honestly didn't even look as bad as Danny Johnson, but Danny Johnson is still riding the wave of how well he played in that 4-game win streak of the regular season last season. But so far this offseason, he's looked terrible. And I've heard he's had good practices, but I've even heard that Josh Drayden has outperformed him in practices. And then Danny Johnson has made a couple of plays in the preseason. But overall, he's looked terrible. Absolutely terrible. Now, granted, I'm not going to give all the blame to him for that one deep bomb, the most open touchdown I've seen this preseason. Percy Butler was also at fault there as well because he's the safety. If anything, you're supposed to be the furthest back. But I don't know if Jack Del Rio has some weird scheme where Percy Butler wasn't supposed to be the person furthest back, but I don't know. Either way, Danny Johnson now was really bad on that play and just a bad preseason overall, but I still see you making the team because you're technically the direct backup slot to Benjamin St-Juste, who had concussion issues last year. You can also contribute as a return man in an emergency, and he's probably riding the wave off of that 4-game win streak last season where he played really well. And again, DeJuan Neal is gone. I feel sorry for him, but that was absolutely terrible. Now, moving on to the safeties, I have us keeping 5. Cameron Curl and Bobby McCain are your starters. Derek Forrest is probably your leading Buffalo nickel, but Percy Butler is also a guy that's right there with them. Say if, as of right now, Derek Forrest may play the Buffalo nickel 60% of the time that we have one out there, I think Percy Butler's not far behind with like maybe 40%. And I also feel like Percy Butler's going to find a way on the field as like a free safety. So I think Buffalo nickel-wise, Derek Forrest is probably in the lead. But overall playing time, I can see a scenario where Percy Butler plays the most, mostly just because of his speed and athleticism and instincts that are improving every day. And then I have Jeremy Reeves as the final guy making the roster. I feel like he played well enough this preseason to finally actually get that last spot. He didn't make the team last year. I think he will this year. And of course, I love Steven Parker. I loved a lot of what I saw from him, especially in that Panthers game. But I think he's a guy that can honestly just sit on our practice squad and nobody else will pick him up. He looked like Lewis Seen in that Panthers game, but since then, the Chiefs game and even this Ravens game, there was all backups all day. He didn't necessarily shine. And so that may be a good thing for us, because if he went out there and balled out, and if we still wanted to keep Jeremy Reeves over him, I would be pretty sure that another team would be picking him up. But right now, I think we could actually stow him away on the practice squad for now, and he can continue to develop because there's definitely some potential there. That man was everywhere in that Panthers game. I mean, honestly, that was one of the best performances from any player on this team, offense or defense, throughout the entire preseason. What he did against the Panthers in that game. It was against backups, but it was phenomenal. And then for our Gardner, my boy from Atlanta, I just don't see him making the team. He was an undrafted free agent anyway. Maybe he makes the practice squad, but I wouldn't bank on it. And so that's the end of the defense. And so then your specialists, 3, of course, Joey Sly, need to become a more consistent kicker. Stop missing the first kick and making the rest of them, make all of them. Tress Way, Best punter in the NFL if you ask me. Keep holding it down. Cameron Cheeseman, everybody complained about us trading up into the 5th round a couple of years ago to draft him, but now we haven't had to worry about long snappers since. And the fact that either he did make the Pro Bowl last year or he was really close to making the Pro Bowl. Either way, a 5th round pick, I don't care what position you are, if you almost make the Pro Bowl or you're a reserve or you make it, hey, that's fine with me. Granted, it is long snapper, but you need a long snapper for things to work. If he's off, we're not making field goals. So I'm really happy that we have a guy that's consistent and dependable at that position. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about this 53-man roster prediction. Again, just to let y'all know, Tuesday at 4 p.m. is the deadline. But like John Kahn pointed out in this podcast, practice is at 1:30. So they doubt that they'll just have some guys that won't even be making the 53-man roster practicing. They'll probably just go ahead and let them know before the practice. And then when they go out for the practice, we'll see who's not on the field and things like that. And we'll probably get a great clue as to who made the team and who didn't. As of right now, we have 81 players because David Bada allows us to have an extra roster spot throughout the offseason. But when we get to the regular season, we're back down to the regular roster limit that everybody else has, 53 people. So again, the deadline is Tuesday at 4 p.m., but we'll probably know by like 1 something. We'll see though, hopefully, because I definitely want to do a video and maybe even a live reaction, a live stream to who ended up making the team and didn't, and probably even react to how many I got correct or wrong. Also, speaking of that, get in the comment section and let me know if you agree or disagree with my selections, and of course leave a like on this video if you liked it, if you learned anything. And as always, I appreciate all the support, man. Shouts out to all of my sponsors, especially my Pro Bowl sponsors whose name you see scrolling on the screen right now. I'm gonna catch y'all later. I'm out.